But before we go into your journey, there's something that really stands out in a lot of interviews you did, which I love and I wish I heard earlier in my life. But so many women who are listening today might not know what their next job is, or might be in a position where they're like, I don't know how this is going to make sense. I'm not passionate about this position, but I'm here. And you have looked back on your journey and have talked about how all these little breadcrumbs actually do make sense. And now I understand it, being in my mid 30s, that it all made sense. But tell me more about what you mean by that.
No, thank you. And I think the idea of breadcrumbs, how they apply forward, for me at least, has given meaning to each piece of the journey. And I have yet to meet a person who says, you know what? Everything I did in my past life was completely irrelevant, had no application. There's no way. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. There's no way that whatever you're doing right now, if you have that internal fire that there is something else that you want to do, in my opinion, I don't think you should ever look at where you are today as a waste or, gosh, you're just kicking the can down the road. You're learning skills today. If you have that mindset, that will help you so much in your future journey. And I think about from modeling when I was a teenager, and that really helped me fund and start the business when I couldn't afford to pay myself, and you're growing a team. And I'm so thankful for that experience today when we have an in-house studio and creative team. And it's much easier for me to put a campaign together because I've been on that side of the camera, if you will. And then a very interesting and completely like diametrically different juxtaposition of having a physician father who's also a chemist and spent time at the lab, like couldn't feel more opposite. And then they come together when you think, okay, why is this makeup artist using this thing on me? And I know this ingredient does that. And oh, okay, here's how the positioning of something makes sense to someone that might not know a lot about this particular skin diagnosis, whatever it might be. And it all does come together in the most incredible way. And you'll look back. And for me, that gives me hope, because I think oftentimes we think we have to have it all figured out right now and we're wasting time. I don't believe that. I think that everything that you're doing helps inform the next chapter of your life that is set up for you. And every person is equipped with what you will need when you're presented with that moment.
Oh, I love that. I literally have goosebumps because I could not agree more. And I was that in my 20s, I was always looking for, I wanted to start a business. I didn't know what the idea was. So I was chasing different jobs, different industries, trying to figure out who I was. And I think it was the biggest gift to jump around. And I've worked in all different industries. It's kind of crazy to look back on my journey. And now that I've started my own business in women's health, all these past experiences, to your point, have worked out, whether it's managing a team, understanding technology, finance, because I was in, banking for a bit, but like all these random things, if you're curious and you're always doing well and working hard in your job, like it all will make sense and it all will only help you as you launch something, right? And I think having that experience, it only helps build momentum for what you want to eventually do. So I love everything you're saying. And before we go into your journey, I did not know this when I was doing prep for you, but you actually grew up in a family of 6, which is wild. I mean, I'm sure there's so much to unpack there, but how do you think maybe growing up in a family of 6, or maybe unique to your own family with your siblings, have really maybe influenced the woman you are today?
I love that you asked that. And thank you for just being such a professional and really looking at full picture, because there are so many things I think in everyone's life that become a superpower if you let them. And I'll say growing up in a large family, and not just a large family, but my oldest brother has special needs. So he has hydrocephalus and cerebral palsy. He's still living and with us, thank the heavens. And he can't see, he can't walk. And he's probably like at about a 7 or 8 year old mentality, like the happiest, most wonderful person ever. Like if I would come down the stairs wearing heels, he could hear them, because typically you overdevelop another sense. And he would say, "You look beautiful, Jamie." And I'm like, I mean, just, he's never gotten to see his siblings, like shapes, but not. So it's just, I think in addition to having Brady Bunch, 3 boys, 3 girls, this large family, having a brother that we all helped him every day to if he needed to be fed, whatever needed to happen. I think that immediately helped give me perspective. And I had a mother and a father who I never once ever heard say, gosh, this is too much of a burden, or this is never, ever, always looking at things on the bright side, right? And that I think really helped me. Number one, how do I complain about anything ever when I get to see today?
Wow.
And I get a walk, you know? And I think having that perspective from a young age and seeing my sweet parents just never stop and always keep their chin up and keep going and reframing situations that it wasn't until I was older and then observed not everybody handles everything in the same way, which is, you know, everyone has their own specific journey. But I am so grateful for, I guess you could say, positive tapes in my head growing up. So number one, the chaos of having 6 kids, and I don't mean that in a negative term at all, like genuinely, one of the skills that is so helpful as an entrepreneur, it truly, if you told me we're going to Asia tonight, we are leaving in 2 hours, my heart rate does not go up as long as my children can either come with me or are like fully taken care of for the night. And we are returning tomorrow. I'm like, great, let's go. Give me the flight number. Like, and I know it might sound crazy to someone, but it really isn't. Like, I think that when you're growing up with the lot happening, or even frankly, I might be the last one of 6 kids picked up from school. I'm sitting outside and like watching the newspaper blow by, like tumbleweeds, you know, like I had to learn to be flexible and wait for my time. And it wasn't all about me. It's about what is happening as a family. And I think when you're, if I had to, and this is just, I'm processing and sharing this as it's coming, it made me comfortable with being uncomfortable and being out of control. Do you see what I'm saying?
100%.
Right? Where it's almost this, I didn't get to dictate what was happening, whereas my own children, and they are the sweetest, are probably not used to that as much. If I'm the last in the carpool line, they're like, "Where are you, mom?" I'm like, "Girlfriend, to be clear, I might have been like 30 minutes after, and I didn't think twice about it. You know, it's just you can't be everywhere all the time." So I think that perspective has been really helpful because even as the CEO today, even post acquisition, and you know, we're part of this amazing publicly traded entity which has its own separate rules, if you will, globally. Every stage and phase of the business, it's been exciting to feel a little uncomfortable almost, right? As you move into the next chapter. And when you can learn to have a mindset of, I can only control what I can control. And if it's something that I can't control, you have to let it go. And that's hard as a human being, hard as an entrepreneur. That means if the breadcrumbs, right, are coming together a different way, you got to be able to say, okay, this is what I can control. This is what I can do at this moment. And everything else, if it's pushing me in this direction, have an open mind and let's see what that might look like and explore. And that level of fluidity, I think, is key because I have seen many friends start businesses and I go, you know, gosh, why didn't that, you know, again, no one has a crystal ball and there's a lot of things that come together. But there's this definition of insanity that I love that says insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
So sometimes in business, sometimes all the time,
Yeah.
you're so determined, like this is the path and this is what's happening. This is how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then when it doesn't, people are gutted. I've been in that moment too. But I do think that, and you're probably right, having grown up in an environment that was like, well, here's what's going to happen now. And someone, you know, my brother had a seizure and we needed to go to the hospital. Like, here's what was going to happen. And here you just get comfortable in a larger family, more going on, and you can control what you can control. I think that applying that to today, what a gift that environment was, because I have been able to function with it. If this is not working, I can't keep trying to put the peg into the hole if it's square and this is round. We've got to adjust our sails and move this direction. And that's where we're headed. And then you'll pause at some point and you're like, oh, I see. Like, I see why that didn't happen, even though you wanted it so badly. That's something for me to unpack as well. That's really interesting.
I love that. I think about that a lot because I think that might be maybe one of the top skill sets as like a happy human in life and in business, because life and starting your own company, there is never going to be perfect days. Like things are always hitting you. And I am someone, which I actually did not know this about myself until I went on my own journey starting a company. I was like, wow, I love control. I did not know that I was like that. I always was like, oh, I'm chill, I'm flexible. But it's not until you start a company where you're like, whoa, I feel like maybe someone doesn't see it, but you mentioned, which really resonated, like if you had to go to Asia tonight, your heart rate didn't shift. Like I feel my body being like, whew, I have to like do breath work. But I will say, I have a big family, but definitely not one of six. And I would say my business has taught me real fast, you have to relinquish control because you cannot control it. Like it's a life of its own. And I don't have kids yet, but I feel so blessed that I kind of had this experience because I know when you have kids, that is like you genuinely can't control them. At least in a business, you can kind of, maneuver some stuff. But I am just so inspired by like how you're raised in that mindset because not everybody has that. But if you do put yourself in uncomfortable situations, which I always have, it can kind of teach you. And I'm still a work in progress, but it all makes sense because I know you and your husband are entrepreneurs and you have 3 kids. So I'm like, you got to be chill and go with the flow. There's no way you can do all that if you're not.
It's so true. And I will say it's incredibly humbling as well,
Yes.
because I remember I had won a big entrepreneurial award and I was asked in this interview, how do you, I guess, stay grounded, something like that. And I said, well, I just was exploded on with one of my kids who's still in diapers and am taking care of that while I was doing it. It does, I will say, being a mother keeps you so grounded in the sense of there are all kinds of last minute things, people falling apart, meltdowns. I'm like, if you've ever tried to negotiate with a 2-year-old, there is no board meeting I have ever been in that is as challenging when you're trying to talk to a toddler who has no sense of rationale, right? Like you can't rationalize with if it is 30 degrees outside. I'm like, sweetheart, let's bring your coat. And they're like, nope. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, you're gonna be cold and this or that. And okay, well, mommy's gonna bring her. Nope. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna bring the coat, but I can't force you to put it on. It is that, to your point, kind of relinquishing control, and it teaches you so many lessons, but you learn those in business. So if and when you decide to have a family, you will
Yeah.
be so well prepared. I'm telling you right
We'll
now,
see.
because it does teach you that. And I think that is such an important skill. And it's like when you said a moment ago, how it will grow into an entity of its own, your business, it teaches you as much as you think you're in control. And I mean, I'm very type A and, love trying to do the best that I can and whatever it was, even like babysitting as a young girl, like the kids would be asleep and, I'd go in the living room and like try to vacuum and make sure that everything looked great, before they got home. And this sort of thing, it's just like, if you're going to do it, try to do it your best. And it's usually like 10% more incrementally than someone else. But just like, if your name is on, like try to do the best that you can. So there's that piece, but then you have this entity that is not going to be exactly what you expect it to be when you do. And that is just such a theme that I think is so important, that do what you can, but then at some point, listen, and you do have to relinquish that control and say, if my customers are showing up here, I thought they wanted this. And sometimes you don't know what you want until you have it, but listen, and let's pivot and let's see how we can help service that demand that might not be where you thought it was going, but it's something that is being asked of you. And you have to, I think, acknowledge that.
Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned when we first started about your brother, I mean, wow, what an incredible person. And, so much perspective growing up with him around. And I think sometimes you can be so fixated on doing something, like you said, like forcing something to get done. But when you zoom out, having that perspective and gratitude of life, we're alive, we're healthy, we're able to see, like, I have to remind myself that sometimes. I'm like, okay, it's not the end of the world. How lucky that I get to wake up and it's sunny and have coffee and go for a walk. Truly, it sounds so basic, but it makes a big difference, especially when you feel like very much out of control and like the quote unquote, the world is ending. It's really not. So I just love everything we've talked about, from like gratitude, relinquishing control, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I love that. Super, super inspired. And what I also find so fascinating about your upbringing, which, has really fostered everything you're up to now, is how your dad really brought you along, right? So I'm just so curious, would he bring all the siblings along? And tell me more about that, because that really helped push you kind of down that path of really enjoying science and everything with that.
It's so true. And it's interesting. There must have been like the universe manifesting this conversation, even heading down this path, because something was served to me on social that I actually forwarded to my mother. And it was all about a father's influence on a daughter and how amazing it is. And my dad and I are really close. My mom and I are as well. And one thing and I'm so grateful for a husband who's this way with our daughters, there was never a gender preferential treatment. There was never the boys do this, the girls do this. I never felt that there was something that my brothers could do that I couldn't do, or vice versa, my other two brothers. And maybe that's a kind of waterfall effect of, hey, let's not look at what the book looks like on the outside. Every person has value. But I went to a really STEM focused all girls school called Hockaday, which in hindsight is funny because I actually told my parents that I wanted to test to go there when I was like 7.
Really? Wow.
I had heard about it from a few girls that I did ballet with. And I'm like, this sounds really great. And came home and said, like, Mom, I love science and can I test? And so, I was able to get accepted and started down that journey. And I think that was important to me because there was this unspoken expectation, I'll say became important to me, because at the time when you're a child growing up, you don't understand the impact things might be having on you. But there was very much an expectation of, you will go out and do great things, not just if you will, but like, what will it be? You might be an attorney, you might be an entrepreneur, you might be a physician, like you will go out and do great things. And then a father who always believed in me. And I had forgotten this, but he said, do you remember that quote that you had written in black marker on the back of your door growing up? And I'm like, I don't actually remember that. And I guess I had taped up a piece of paper and written in Sharpie, with, I'm sure, like stars and whatever. And it said, shoot for the moon. If you land short, you might just land on a star. And so funny. But I think that mindset of just go for it. The worst thing that can happen is someone says no. And my dad, in addition to his practice, became an owner when I was really young in one of the top skincare labs in the US, and had several other different kind of health and wellness investments. And he was very much still is a Renaissance man in terms of mindset, super, super cerebral. So lots of conversation. And it's interesting because of Mike Garrett and not really, it's harder to travel, understandably, with him. In hindsight, when he, same model, became an owner in a facility in Singapore, R&D for skincare, and then in Germany, I imagine looking back, probably because my mom said, I need to stay with Garrett, my dad said, do you want to come? Which is interesting, right? So in hindsight now, this is a great session. We are just getting through all of it together. I did. I mean, I was probably 14, early teenager, and then several, other trips over high school years I would go. And maybe a mother would have typically more said, well, why don't we bring, you can go shopping during the day but my dad just took me to meetings, to the lab, which is great because I was like a sponge. And now having a global footprint, incredibly helpful to know at such a young age what someone in Dusseldorf might want for their skin as opposed to someone in, Bangkok or anywhere. Like just understanding some of the universal asks in addition to regionalized derivations for skincare specifically, I think was really helpful. But more than that, it was the unconditional belief in whatever you set your mind to do, you can do. And as a mother now, I think that's really important. And I try to remind my kids that at the end of the day, I don't care if you want to be an equestrian rider, an author, a entrepreneur, full-time mother, whatever it is, I'm on team you. So if it makes you happy and it brings you joy and you're doing your best to give back to the world, then awesome. I am there for it. Your value doesn't change based upon any type of worldly success or not success. I'm here for all of it. And I think that's really important. And I am far from perfect as a mother, and we're all in our journeys as we're moving along. I want to make sure that my own children and then team members as well that kind of become like your work family, just that belief. And you said this word a minute ago, which I love, you said curious. If you remain curious and you want to continue to have that growth mindset, you can apply that to just about anything. I mean, you are amazing. Look at what your podcast has become. That's incredible. That's because you were curious and committed and you continued forward. You could apply those same skill sets to a million, if you wanted to have been a physician or that innately who you are as a curious, bright, committed individual. And I think should be so encouraging to people that those skills can be applied as you look at those breadcrumbs into any moment in your life. And remember that they are seasons, and we try to bite everything off all at once. And it feels overwhelming. And then you just want to give up because you're like, I can't do it all. So there are seasons of life, and giving yourself that grace to say, this is my season right now. Maybe it's an education season. Maybe it's I'm going to go work in this industry to figure it out season. And then I want to start my own thing, or I don't, or whatever it might be, or I got to pause everything for a season to help care for someone or whatever. I think giving yourself that perspective of this is a moment, and that doesn't mean that this moment defines total outcome. We're all on a journey, and you just have to find joy in whatever season you're in.
Yeah, I love that. And even in your business, there's so many seasons, and I'm used to, and I realized quickly this does not help when you run your own company. Like from my background being in finance, like I was working 12-hour days on the computer, and but that is what brought me success, and I moved up the ranks. But then I realized when I started my company, yeah, it's helpful to get things off the ground, but it's all about sustainability. I'm like, I can't be sitting here the way I'm working, especially when it's your business. It's something that you can't really learn until you're in it. It's all encompassing to a level I've never experienced in a intense job. It's like a different kind of emotional intensity with the work there, right? So I realized very fast that if I'm sitting here working literally like that every day and I'm thinking about it when I sleep, it's like my limb, it's a child of mine, right? I had days very early on where I'm like, I don't feel joy, and I feel like I'm the Yasmin where I was unhappy working for someone. I've created that same monster. So I just love that you said so much of it is seasons and what brings you joy, and creating a sustainability aspect. Maybe there's 2-3 weeks you go hard, right? But then you have a little bit of a break, or a little bit more flexibility in your schedule, because you never really have a break when it's your business, right? But I love that, and that's something I wish I kind of knew early on. But listen, we're all learning, and I'm part of my journey, so
No, but I think how incredible, and I have such respect for you to have that perspective as well. And it is true. I've tried to explain that as well. I love and adore my team. I'm so grateful for how hard everyone works. I haven't even had the privilege of meeting everyone on our team. For example, that service in store and a state I haven't been to yet, for example, right? But that doesn't take away from the gratitude that you feel. And because you want your team to be successful, I remember when one of my team members, I was so touched, and she just said, I'm able to get this house for our family now, as she's worked her tail off and been promoted along the way. And it is amazing. And you almost feel the weight of everyone's families or mortgages on your shoulder, meaning that I want to show up for my team because everyone's working so hard and I don't want to fail them. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the only way that can describe the weight of it. Is it's not just for you. I feel the weight of my team's own success, and they're providing for their families. And there's this, again, kind of cascade effect that until you are wearing that, you don't feel as much because you're there, and then you are able to turn it off more. I can so relate to the constant churning. Is you want to make sure that as everyone is committed, that you're helping to guide everyone in the right direction, making the best choices for everyone. It's really such a special feeling, and such a different feeling than just the output itself. But I think your comment on, gosh, I wasn't feeling joy anymore, and I was you're right, you have to have those things that you can mentally turn it off. And then I think the anxiety inducers as an entrepreneur is, especially in the beginning, I think there's a commonality of this almost imposter syndrome of, I don't know what I'm doing. And then you realize, wait, I don't know that anybody else knows
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing either. So then you kind of move through that, right? You're like, okay. And then I have found as you grow and, we are in Harrods or we're in Sephora, wherever it might be. And then you worry about making sure that you're taking care of your accounts or whatever. And every notch, there's something new. Or you have a key employee that you really are so grateful that now they're taking on the whatever financial modeling or whatever it might be. And you can start to develop at least for me, these anxieties of, oh my gosh, what happens if this or this purchase order or our factory closes down? Like you go through all of these worst case scenarios as you start living them.
Yeah.
We literally had inventory at the bottom of the ocean.
Oh my God. I'm dealing with an inventory issue right now. And I'm like, yes, but bottom of the ocean. Oh my
Yes,
God.
literally from a container that, I mean, bless their heart, like no one was harmed, but the entire boat, we've had a truckload of our top moisturizer that, I mean, again, thank the Lord, no one was harmed, but the entire back of the truck, I don't know if it was after they were getting gas or something, or maybe it was exploded. So we
Oh,
lost
wow.
kilos of products. So stuff happens constantly that are out of your control. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Those moments. So here's what I do. First of all, I think you have a girl gang. Like, Yasmin, you are now forever part of my girl gang. If I can
Oh my
ever do
God.
anything to help you, like, girl, like you let me
Likewise.
know. Like you have to have those friendships and people that have walked your path, that you're there to just listen and say, don't feel alone. Like it's okay. And you're going to get on the other side of this. So I think having that support system is important. And then number two, I have found that I can regain that emotional feeling of control. I'll say feeling because you're never really in control. Living and thinking through the most anxiety inducing scenario, and it eradicates fear for me. So say, for example, think of like your number one kind of your right-hand person, right? Say, for example, for whatever reason, they're getting married and they're taking another job across the world, whatever. And you go, oh my gosh, what do I do? How can I find someone that will, whatever it might be. Or gosh, we just opened this retailer and now they're shuttering or whatever your inventory, whatever the thing is, there's always something that gives you that, what I do. So I mentally live that moment, even if it's not even a sprinkle that it could happen. And I just say, okay, this is all like internal. And I'll say, if that happens, what's the worst thing that can happen? Go down there. Okay. Then we lose that account. Okay. So then would we be able to replace our growth over here? Okay. Well, if we can't, then we would just do this. And then next day, and then you start to go through down to the point of, if you lose the business, Yasmin, for yourself, you could start all over. Would it be hard? Yes. But if you wanted to, you could, because you've done it. So by removing the control of, oh my gosh, if this happens, because you can live in a constant state of anxiety as an entrepreneur, worrying about, oh my gosh, what if this happens? Or, we can't hit the ship date for this launch. And then and things like that will happen. But I think if you live it and let yourself experience, like, okay, worst case scenario, I have my faith in God, I have my family, I have my health, I can see and walk, and I have strength that if it's something that I wanted to try again, I could try again. And if I chose not to as well, but those core things, that at least for me has given me a lot of comfort and takes away the anxiety or the fear and allows me to be more mentally and emotionally flexible.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just a helpful tool, I think, as you're building.
That resonates a lot. I love that. I'm definitely going to be using that because sometimes in your mind, it seems bigger than it is. But when you actually walk through it, like you gave examples of, it does allow you to be flexible, like you said. And nothing is a surprise. I mean, you'll learn that with like all these, the truck blowing up and this, like there's so many surprises, but living through those moments, I think that's a really good piece of advice. I love that. Well, Jamie, let's go into your entrepreneurial story. Before BeautyBio, actually, I didn't know this about you until I was doing prep, that you and your dad actually co-founded another business, I believe, organic care. So tell me more about that. And I don't know if, did you transition from that into BeautyBio, or what was kind of your entrepreneurial journey with both of those companies?
So we started organic care trying to even think the year because we started BeautyBio in 2011. So it must have been maybe a year or two before that. I even have to go back and look. And we launched at Nordstrom. And this was before organics were even a thing. And in fact, at the time, Nordstrom had I want to call it like a well beauty section. It was with, I think like Stella McCartney had a line, Juice Beauty. There were just a few collections before clean beauty was like a conversation. And it was great. In fact, it won several different awards. And at the time, we had just launched, we we're super excited. And we had set up this sustainability initiative, and a portion of the proceeds of the product were donated back, which has been helpful as we've been involved in different charitable pieces. I love starting with some type of an impact focus. I think it's really important. And I'm trying to remember who connected. Oh, I know what it was. I was on a morning show, like a local kind of Good Morning Texas. They had asked me to go on as speaking about, I'm sure it was, skincare tips or something like this. And the buyer for HSN was watching, and I don't know how she got my contact information, but she reached out and she said, we would love to have your line on HSN. And again, breadcrumbs and timing of things. And at the same time, our retailer had started closing this division of Well Beauty. And we were like the last man standing, Yasmin, like
Wow.
the last brand. So and again, it's funny how things come in waves, because now clean beauty, and we're obviously a
Yes.
clean brand at Sephora and Ulta and everywhere. So same principles, right? And I remember at HSN, I said, well, organic and clean beauty, which no one, again, at that time was really talking about. And they just said, I don't know that, not that our customer wouldn't want that, but how that resonates with them, like that it's really understood. And I said, okay, they said, is there an openness? We had our new retinol that we're just getting ready to launch. We're in the process of filing the patent for, which is still a top seller for us. And I said, well, it's interesting. I have this new technology that we're working on that we're going to be launching. It's clean as well. And they loved it. I said, well, have you be the exclusive launch partner on this, which was so helpful to me, especially as a young business starting out when I didn't have a team, right? But the amplification of like an HSN or a QVC is amazing, because with one person, you can speak to, 90 million people versus me at the time. And Nordstrom's been a partner now for years and years, showing up at one singular Nordstrom door, talking to 300 or 400 people at a trend show, for example, which is amazing. But in terms of scale and scaling yourself, and when you're building a business, that's a really critical piece of it, right? It made so much sense, because the same effort, and I was a young mom, so I was raising my business and the kids at the same time. And I knew I didn't want to start down the retail path, which requires a much more complicated staffing solution in store. We have 560 people across the globe that service, our different stores. And that is, again, far more complex. The day my daughter, my youngest Gracie, went to full day school is the day that we met with Neiman Marcus and then started opening up the retail piece, which is just more time intensive, right? So HSN reached out. We launched the retinol product together under BeautyBio with clean beauty. So instead of having organic in the name, we were able to transition and keep our clean message, but help it to focus more on the science, bio standing for bioscience, so beauty bioscience. And that was so the right choice. But my controlling self, Yasmin, was the same. I'm like, no, but it needs to be clean. Like, this is the future. It was ahead of its time, but
Yeah.
I'm like, this is the future. And it's okay. I had to be okay with the fact that the customer wasn't there yet. So I can either like keep saying organics, and we were talking certified organic, like the black seal, if you remember, versus the green seal. And people didn't know that, percentage organic had to be for the black versus the whole thing. And which is why it's kind of morphed into clean beauty, if you will. But it was amazing. And I'm so grateful that we were able to launch into television and then retail and digital. So my goal is to always have this omni-channel footprint with very specific retailers, very specific lane. But that's how it all started. So I think the lesson there is being open to transition based upon what consumer, level of demand and education, if you will, right? And keep shouting your message. But if it doesn't make sense to someone, it doesn't mean you change your DNA and who you are, but you can help reframe in a way that makes sense to bring everyone along your journey, right? And number two is be willing to take a chance. I mean, if you've ever watched that movie Joy, where she goes on air to sell, literally, it was like that.
Oh my gosh.
Girl,
I
you
would
go
go
on air
blank.
and there is legit, there is a counter to, they don't have it on anymore. They've
Oh,
taken it down.
really?
I'm sure. Like it's like emotionally scarring. No, I love our HSN team. In fact, Juliana Rancic and I are doing a really fun collaboration in a month on HSN together.
Oh,
And I love
fun.
her. If you've not connected with her, she's just a gem of a person. And I love just bringing women together. But we were laughing, like the counter used to be there. So I roll out on set. I have never done this before. All I know is what I know, having grown up in the space that I've known. I'm very passionate about this retinol system that I still love and use. And I just remember thinking, there are 20 cameras pointed at me. It's live. I have
Oh
the
my
counter that
gosh.
is showing zeros, like all red zeros. And they brought in 1,200 units. We had 8 minutes. It was in prime time. And I'm thinking to myself, and I sent out an email the night before. In fact, my friend Jen reminded me of it yesterday. I was like, hey, I'm going to be on HSN tomorrow. If you happen to tune in and watch, like, please say a prayer. And I sat there and it was probably a good like minute and a half in. And I'm still like, these little zeros are staring at me like eyeballs. And I'm there with the host. And I'm thinking, like, please, Lord, like my mom, my best friend, can someone, like, we just need to see one. And all of a sudden, I just tried to relax. And I just said, I've always felt that you are educating. I'm not, buy whatever you want to buy, like share what you know. And I just kept telling myself that. And I just pretended the camera was my best friend. And I'm like, okay, just tell her about this amazing new formula. And I did. And all of a sudden the ticker starts going one, and then it starts going by tens
Oh my
and then
gosh.
hundreds. And we
No
sold out.
way.
We sold out. Like I couldn't believe it. And I was so grateful. And it's just been an amazing journey. And every brand has their own starts and stops and everything along the way. But I was honestly such a shy child growing up. And if I told my future self that I would regularly be on television in front of millions of people or have these different speaking moments in front of whatever it might have been, I probably would have said, absolutely not. Yeah, right. I'm like, it gives me anxiety sometimes going to the fifth grade cocktail. You know,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, what if I
seriously.
can't remember everyone's name? So
Yes.
it is, but it's good because it pushes me outside of my comfort zone. And at the end of the day, that's what life is about, right? Like pushing yourself and morphing and learning new skills and trying to do good along the way and have patience with yourself. And most importantly, like just keep going. There's that Babe Ruth quote that I love that a friend told me years ago. And I said, it's pretty hard to beat someone who never gives up. So like, it's only a competition with yourself, like don't compare. Just if you are pushing yourself and trying to refine who you are a little bit incrementally every day, every year, then just look back and give yourself a pat on the back and you're doing it and you're climbing and you're going and it's good.
Oh my gosh, you said so many amazing things. I don't even know. My mind is still digesting everything. But one thing that you mentioned, because I've been in this situation, but a very small scale, not on in front of millions of people on live television, but being able to, I mean, I really can't imagine seeing zeros like and you're live because that mental game you're playing in your head when you're recording is like you have to quickly switch out of that. And I've only felt that at a small scale. Once I recently did a podcast and I was dealing with something personal and I couldn't cancel. I couldn't reschedule. And I showed up and I remember just being there, being like, Yasmin, you have to compartmentalize. You have to put this on the side and show up as your best self. And it was tough. And I had my team like review the video and I was like, was it bad? Like I was dealing with some personal things. It was a tough day for me. She's like, Yasmin, you would never know. And I was like, are you joking me? So I can only imagine being able to shift that mindset is also really important because you can't really predict what's going to happen sometimes for your day. Something happens to your child, something happens to a family member. Like sometimes you have to still show up. So that is good job to quickly switch and just focus on, I'm here to educate and like we'll figure out the sales. Like that will be the second thing. But oh my gosh, I love that story so much. What I thought was so interesting about another reason why you want to start BeautyBio is you and your dad had, you had this lab, you're working on different ingredients, but you guys never initially launched brands and products, right? You were selling this ingredient to other brands. So tell me also the aha moment where you're like, we need to do this ourselves.
Again, breadcrumbs. The frustration that I had is oftentimes, so our house was really known for lab houses, sometimes what they're called, for new raw materials, like the little, ingredients on the back of a product that are strange chemical names, right? And they're not always chemicals, sometimes they're natural, but that's called your INCI list. And there's actually it stands for INCI, International Cosmetic Index. So we actually would file new raw materials, like make new raws. So oftentimes raw material suppliers, just like bakers with ingredients, will show up and like, we have this new thing, and they might sell it to a ton of different labs that then make it for different brands, right? And being like my early super naive self, I just thought when you sold a new raw material and you put together what's called a technical data sheet to say it is, water or oil soluble, here's the pH, here's the viscosity, blah, 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 here are all the things about it, that people looked at, most importantly, the clinical concentration that ingredient needed to be in a formula to be efficacious. In my mind, why would you include an ingredient at less than what is, from a validity standpoint, is going to deliver the result, right? Unfortunately, great raw materials that are effective can often be really expensive. And at that stage, it didn't really cross my mind that someone might say, well, hey, if we only put in, instead of 5%, 2.5%, it's still above the 1% line, it probably will do something. Like, I grew up in such this is the R&D, and my father drilling into me, like, this is how, first party testing, third party testing, that it didn't really dawn on me. And I saw it happen a few different times, which was really disappointing. And no one talked about it. Like, no one would have even known unless someone was curious enough, right, to go back and say, hey, did they actually put it in at this percentage? I felt like, outside of the education of, oh, you should be using X percentage of azelaic acid or hyaluronic acid or retinoids or whatnot, being able to depend on a line that says, you have our promise that we will put what is clinically proven as the efficacious, not only percentage, but delivery system as well, and test the formula after it's done. And what is shocking is there's so much conversation around single ingredients, which are great. I love Sika. I love magnesium ascorbyl phosphate. Like, I love all of these ingredients. But what people don't often talk about is the finished good, because it's incredibly expensive and not required, by the way, to third-party tests, not first-party, but third-party clinically test, not consumer perception survey, which is fun, but oftentimes I see them and it's like, 6 people in office said, I'm like, no. So it's third-party clinically testing. Did it work or did it not? And I'll tell you straight up, we have gone all the way to third-party testing and pulled a formula. Because do you know, like, how heart-wrenching that is? Like,
I
all of
can't
the other data
imagine.
points along the way, but like, we are not going to launch something that doesn't work, period. Like, our goal is not to have 200 SKUs. In fact, my hope is to simplify. Like, these are all the extras, but like basics. You need vitamin C during the day, vitamin A at night. Here's what you should look for in each. You need, those are your nutrients. Think of like your protein powder and your spinach, and then using performance beauty tools. That's like your treadmill, right? Like, you need like the weights and the treadmill and the nutrition, right? So breaking it down, SPF every day. It doesn't need to be huge and crazy, but here are the things that are available. And if you're wanting to, your skin's your largest living organ, but it has to be the combination of right ingredient, right delivery system, right target cell. Or I've seen formulas where they've literally had an alpha hydroxy acid in at a level that would completely negate the effects of the retinoid in the formula. Why would you do that, right? So my hope is at some point in time, while single ingredients are amazing, that we can say this formula, like finished good formula, is tested to deliver this. And that's just a normal conversation. And while consumer perception is great, and we absolutely do consumer perception surveys in addition to full clinical testing, but people aren't used to hearing clinical testing numbers, because 40% improvement in hydration, which is amazing, feels like, oh, that was a fail because anything below a 70 is a fail, right? It's no, that's like a transepidermal water loss test, not percent of people.
Mhm.
100% of people saw this change. So part of the marketing, there's a lopsidedness, I think, in the beauty industry where everyone has continued to index to something that looks great, like a report card of 100%, but it might not be as meaningful as something that's just going to be a re-education piece. So our commitment is all of our products are tested, they're clean, they're good for you, they're going to work, and we're going to keep it as edited as possible. And just grateful for the growth that we've had along the way with that message.
I love that. It's so amazing, Jamie. I knew nothing about this. I'm very familiar with the wellness world because that's the world I'm in and how people say things, but I looked behind it and I was like, it's not efficacious, but good point to bring it up with skincare. And I want to end because I know we're coming up on time real fast about what's next for you. I know big congrats, the company recently sold. I can't imagine everything that went into that. I've heard so many stories from founders about how it was a big transition for them, but tell me more, like what's been maybe a challenging thing or maybe what are you looking forward to? Because I know this is a very interesting time post acquisition.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that were really important to me when we looked at different strategic options for an acquisition, it's almost like your baby going off to college, right? Because now you're part of this larger global ecosystem that can help from an R&D perspective, from sourcing, regulatory in a country that maybe we wouldn't have entered into just because the regulation was so complex. So that's been really delightful to just continue to empower our team. But one of the pieces that is important to me, I love what I do. I love this brand. I wanted to make sure that I could continue to work in a capacity for as long as it's helpful to the brand as it's growing. And part of that process is I wanted to be a part of something knowing that I'm too young to retire, love what I do. And so one of the pieces is continuing to help mentor other brands. So they're part of the acquiring entity has an incubator that will be acquiring brands in different stages of their business, in addition to contract manufacturers and so forth that they own. So I will be able to continue my involvement helping to mentor brands and founders as well as it makes sense, which naturally I love to do and is probably my most favorite thing. And I'll be excited to do that in the future.
Amazing. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for coming. We'll have to do like a part 2, 3. There's so much to talk about, but this was so fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.